Ritu I fal hoye. O mine, everything happens slowly. The gardener may water 100 pots, but the fruit comes only in its season. But is our planet's season changing too rapidly? Are we watering the wrong seeds? I would now like to invite Anita Mani, Dr. Debajit Palit, Abinash, Mohanty and Bharati Chaturvedi on the stage to please come up and take your seats. Leading us on this critical journey is Anita Mani, a writer whose words take flight like the birds. She so eloquently observes. From the newsroom to the corporate world and back again, her career mirrors the migratory patterns of her feathered subjects. Through her book imprint, Indian Pitta, and she shares her passion for nature, reminding us that even in the heart of Delhi, the wild world whispers its stories. Joining Anita is Dr. Debajit Palit, a scientist whose work sits at the crucial intersections of energy, environment, and human well-being. A researcher, practitioner, author, and trainer, Dr. Palit is a leading voice in the field of renewable energy and energy transition. His insights, gleaned from over 26 years of experience and recognized by Stanford University's top 2% world scientist ranking, will be invaluable as we discuss the path towards a cleaner and a more sustainable future. We also welcome Abinash Mohanty, a climate scientist whose work spans the globe. As the global sector head of climate change and sustainability at IPE Global, he tackles the urgent challenges of climate risk and adaptation. From developing India's climate vulnerability index to establishing climate risk observatories, his work translates scientific knowledge into tangible action. Guiding this vital conversation is Bharati Chaturvedi, an environmentalist and writer whose work embodies the spirit of Chintan, another way of thinking. Through her non-profit, she tackles the present pressing issues of waste, air pollution, and climate change, advocating for a circular society and environmental justice. Her podcast, The Chintan Chats, amplifies crucial voices in the environmental movement. This exploration is presented by the Chintan Research Foundation, CRF, a think tank committed to innovative solutions for a sustainable future. Before we begin, let's take a moment to reflect with a few lines. The rivers whisper, the forests sighs. Beneath the same vast endless sky, borders drawn, yet winds still roam. The earth unites, it's our shared home. Let's listen, learn, and take a stand to heal and help hand in hand. With that thought, let's dive into today's discussion with our esteemed speakers who bring wisdom, experience, and vision to the table. Let the conversation begin. Thank you. Is this working? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we'll just start with this while that is being prepared. Okay, so I'm going to start. Thank you everyone for being here. We are really talking about is the planet in transition. because we're seeing changes, we're experiencing changes, we're reading about them, but what's happening? So I'm going to really start with Anita. Anita, my question to you is that, you know, more and more and more people have started bird watching. People are now getting interested in nature, what's around us. And you, as both a bird watcher and as a publisher of books on birds and natural history, you know, what trends are you and your authors seeing around the world of birds?
I think I started bird watching must have been 2006 or 2007. And when I live in Delhi, and that's where I started bird watching. And when we used to go for bird walks, it used to be about 10 of us, 12 of us, maximum 20 people. Now, the really popular walks, you can meet up to 100 people who are willing to brave the Delhi fog, pollution, and chill to come and look at birds. And I think the pandemic gave it a bit of a push because outdoor activity was what everyone wanted to do. And I think that people, after post-pandemic, even though indoor entertainment is still possible now, I think a lot of people have stayed on to watch because I think they fell in love with the natural world, they enjoyed what they saw on those walks. And birding is a very inclusive and a very accessible kind of hobby. You don't need to travel to fancy places. Most of our cities have the most beautiful birds. In fact, Bharati and I were just admiring the swifts which were circling the lake behind you, and we found 2 or 3 species of swifts that are found here in Bhopal. And I haven't seen some of these birds for some time, so it's such a pleasure to make reacquaintance with them. So yeah, so I think bird watching has really seen a boom, and we've also what's also helped us a lot is technology. I think one, digital photography. It's so ridiculously easy to take a good photograph these days. You just have to, you're pretty much brainless. You just point your camera, make sure you press the focus button, and if you're lucky enough, among the 1,000 photographs you can now take, some of us like me who started shooting on film would conserve each and every frame because it was too expensive to develop all of those. But now you can shoot 1,000 photographs in one outing, and you can, pick one and one will be good. So all these things have really helped, and there are apps which help you identify bird sounds. So all this sort of contributed to, to making bird watching very popular.
So, Abinash, you know, there's been this big change that we're seeing. Shifts in wilderness, but also shifts in the way that the environment is behaving. And I'll talk to you briefly about monsoon, because Abinash's new work really is looking at how is the monsoon changing in India, and he's gathering a lot of data, human-centric data. So my question to you really is exactly that. How is the monsoon changing in our country, and how is that impacting human beings?
Thank you, Bharati. Let's give a shout out to BLF because this is 7th edition, and having a conversation beyond literature is indeed a wilderness to have, but it is important. It is important it's because climate is no more a subject of scientists like us or experts like us. It is kind of impacting each one of us. Let's start with birds, what Anita started. I do a lot of hypergranular modeling, trying to understand what does this temperature, अगर बाहर बारिश है या फिर temperature rise है, तो how is it going to impact each one of us? The first indicator that we need to look at are these species around us. The birds, the insects, they kind of tell us way faster, but we don't understand those languages, and that's what is the first indicator. Regarding the impacts, as I was introduced of establishing climate risk observatories, so within the observatories what we are trying to understand is how exactly the larger climate is changing. Some of the numbers, because I do deal with a lot of numbers day in, day out, churn them out. So more than 80% of Indian districts are extreme event hotspots. Now 80% is like 8 out of 10 kind of districts are impacted either by cyclone, flood, drought, heat wave, or multiple combination, and not to our surprise, the violinist comes down when 45% of these districts are becoming kind of showcasing a swapping trend. Traditional flood-prone areas are becoming drought-prone, drought-prone areas are becoming flood-prone, and there has been districts in India where both flood and drought are happening in the opposite side of the same district, right? So these wilderness, we try to kind of connect it, how are our monsoons changing. In our latest report, we could find that the monsoon overall is no more, because in central India and North India, we are dependent on the southwest monsoons, is no more going to start in June. It just kind of the onset happens, but after that, you have an extended summer kind of pattern. August, September, October, kind of, you will feel always heat around it. जिस दिन बारिश हो गई, एक दो दिन के लिए थोड़ी सी टेम्परेचर कम हो गया, that's how you plug it in. But what is largely happening is this, it's a heat trap that we call it as. Normally our lakes, our oceans are the larger heat trapper, but oceans are getting warmer, lands are getting warmer, so it's more like if it's 50 degree outside and we lock you all up in a room with a heater on. It's that kind of impact, and that's why it is leading to larger of this incessant erratic rainfall. So एक दिन में इतनी बारिश हो जाएगी कि पूरी बाढ़ आ जाए, right? That is why you are seeing a lot of these urban flooding happening in some of our major hubs. Bangalore witnessed that, Chennai witnessed that, Kerala witnessed that. All of them are a resultant of incessant erratic rainfall. At core of it is heat. Now, heat has got a human-centric impact. All of us are going to be impacted because our productivity is going to lose. India is going to lose 30 million jobs by 2030. Then heat is also going to increase our family health budgets. Heat is also going to impact our overall industrial revenue. Almost 20% in the agricultural sector is going to lose because of heat. So these numbers are very stark. But the only solution and the only hope that comes down is what Anita, you and what you have been doing, trying to understand the nature. Because if you start fixing some portion of natures, that's where the solution lies. Then probably science, nature, and human beings, that nexus can fix this feathered world.
Thanks. I can't resist going back to Anita very briefly before going to Dr. Palit. But can you give me, are you seeing examples of this biodiversity and monsoon kind of changing trends on the field?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think, for example, you spoke about like drought-prone areas then becoming flood-prone. I think if you look at northwestern India and people who've been in Bikaner, we do some bird watching in Bikaner, you see some beautiful vultures and birds of prey in the local carcass dump. Most terrible foul-smelling place with the most magnificent birds. But the point is that people are seeing fog and mist in Bikaner for the first time. And this is happening because, in addition to monsoon networks, there's heavy rain in the northwest. There are also canal networks. We're building canal networks for irrigation, which is bringing moisture into dry areas. Now you're changing habitats. Now that has two impacts. One, there are species that are used to living in dry habitats that can no longer live in these landscapes. But there are birds that are benefiting because there's heavy rainfall. In the monsoon, heavy proliferation of insects and caterpillars, which are key food for birds are breeding. So, in a sense, it's having impacts in multiple directions. And but oscillations in temperature are also harmful. I mean, a lot of species, especially frogs and amphibians, live in a very narrow band of temperature. And the minute you alter that, I think you have a lot of trouble with ensuring the preservation of these species because they can't live outside these bands. We can turn on air conditioners and heaters, but I think animals don't have recourse to such things. And if we are respectful of the difference, I think that would go a long way.
Thanks. So, Dr. Palit, you're one of the world's leading scientists, and so I'm going to ask you a really hard question because what's the point having a scientist if you can't use their knowledge for public use? So, we saw in the budget yesterday, you yourself work a lot on green energy, on solar, and all of that. And we are moving as fast as is possible towards renewable energy. But on the other hand, there's been there's been a lot of, let me say, a lot of difficulty in having both solar and even for that matter wind, and looking at how biodiversity is compatible, because there are those micro clashes. So what do you make of those, and what kind of solutions do you see ahead?
Thank you, Bharati. It's a pleasure to be here. I never thought that I'll be part of a Lit Fest, being from the hardcore scientific background. But yes, climate change and energy transitions are, I think, bringing different disciplines together, given the importance of the subject. So what we call is that energy is a universal currency after the invention of fire. Without energy, we cannot live. That's become as good as a need and not a want now. Now, we already had two energy transitions, from the traditional fuel to coal, and from coal to petroleum and natural gas, and then and also to electricity. And now we are having a third transition where we are saying that all the energies that has been used earlier are not clean, and it is going to impact in a big way the biodiversity and also the climate and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, the clean energy that we are considering, solar and wind, and Bharati rightly mentioned, there are also conflict whether we can go on expanding solar and wind the way we want to do it. And there are examples from there in Rajasthan, for example, the Supreme Court had taken cognizance of the Great Indian Bastard, where a lot of solar plants are coming up, and it was found that the Great Indian Bastards are getting directly affected because of the transmission lines being constructed. Not directly as such for the solar plants, but because of the transmission line being created to transmit the electricity from solar plants to the mainland. And definitely such type of examples are there. In fact, in election campaign, President Trump also highlighted the fact that in most of the offshore wind plants, offshore means in the sea, there's a lot of, they are affecting not just the birds but also the sharks and other things in the Atlantic. So there are challenges, but we also have to see that how do we take forward the green energy. So there are solutions to it. I think Supreme Court gave a very good verdict in that they formed a committee for the Great Indian Bastards, and the committee came to the conclusion that okay, the entire land area in the desert is not the habitat of Great Indian Bastard. Most of the 90% of the GIBs are concentrated in 10% of the land where the solar plants are being planned, and they asked that they let the solar plants not be constructed within the 10% of the land, some a particular land area, I think 10 or 15, something like that. And avoiding that place, you can go on and construct the solar plant. The other option is that whether you can have the transmission lines underground, so as to avoid the direct conflict with the GIB. So what we are saying is that renewable energy is good, but how do we make renewable energy as a responsible energy? So that whatever problems and challenges we have faced in the first two transitions, creating a lot of problems, we should not have such challenges and problems. Say 20 years down the line, we should not look back and see that, okay, renewable energy has not done good for us. So we have to be mindful of the biodiversity and also the impact on other species, and accordingly make a plan so that both can coexist with each other. The whole idea is that it's not about human only, it's about all the species to be coexisting, and so we have to be mindful of the impact on every species world. So I always say that there's a new terminology called people-centric energy transition. So I have always been thinking that why do we call it people-centric? We should be art-centric energy transition.
So that's a great one, a more earth-centric transition. And I want to talk of heat now, because even sitting here in Bhopal, those of us who are not from Bhopal are just surprised at how warm it is. I know today is Basant Panchami, but Basant Panchami isn't supposed to be this warm that we're walking around without a shawl, a sweater. I don't know how you both are managing. You must be feeling so warm. But at least, so what's happening is that India acknowledges the heat crisis, and heat action plans are being made across the country. And some places, Delhi, for example, actually doesn't have anything really formally authorized. But I want to ask Abinash, what are the top 2 or 3 things that most cities and most districts are doing around heat mitigation? How are we going to, what is happening around trying to help us survive this? Because we know 2024 was the hottest year ever recorded in history, and the deaths were really extraordinary, because you would read about some boy aged 20 in some city working in a pizza oven, which, and many of us eat pizzas, and you don't think about it, and he just collapsed, because normally he wouldn't, but it was just nearly 50 degrees in the city. So it's quite complicated, how livelihoods, how all of these things work. So can you tell us what would be like the 2 or 3 big trends in heat management that we are seeing in policy?
Let's try to break down heat management. Overall, heat management in India is very skewed. Heat, we never recognized it as a extreme event until very recently, when the National Disaster Management Act, kind of under NDMA, gave out guidelines that all of these districts, and in India we have got 3 tiers of policies. One is a national disaster management plan that we have. Similarly, in the climate side, we have a national action plan on climate change. Similarly, at sub-national level, you have got sub-national action, climate action plans. But at heat or for disasters, you have got 1 tier below. It's like state disaster management plan and district disaster management plan. 2.5, 3 years before, I did a study, and during that study we could find that only 30% of our district disaster management plan, out of 748, 43 districts, however the calculation goes, have got an updated district disaster management plan. And that district disaster management plan needed to be updated every year. Only 30% of them have got updation. That do not integrate what is the real-time impact. So heat action plans are providing, or any of our, for that person, any of our disaster plans are providing a purview of 50 years and 100 years. Literally, it's happening now, it's happening tomorrow, it's going to happen, it also happened yesterday. So that here and now needs to be pulled in to those. That's what we call it as hyper-granular risk assessments, or hyper-granular heat risk assessment. Because heat for us, we can switch on ACs, as you rightly said, we can switch on, get onto a car which has got air conditioners, working out, but somebody who is working on field needs a different kind of heat mitigation plan. Similarly, school children have to have a different heat mitigation plan. So that is where the impact-based kind of heat risk or heat risk mitigation plan need to come down into the picture. That's number one. You need to identify which devil are you going to fight with before you put out that heat is the bigger devil in the room, right? That's one. Once you acknowledge, you can't have a razor-sharp generic blanket cover that please diminish the working hours or school hours are being shortened. Those are like a band-aid over a wound, right? It's not going to stitch it out. So what you need is, you need to go back and look at what exactly is the micro temperature. As you rightly said, we are sitting right beside a lake, and the temperature and we don't have cooler breezes here. And one of the reasons why all of these are coming into picture, because 50 degree outside is different to that of a 50 degree inside house. That's where the ambient temperature comes into picture, right? We might have ACs, so we'll not feel that, but our house helps live in tin houses. So literally the temperature goes until 57 degrees. And that's where the organs will start non-functioning. That's a long-term thing. So heat and health kind of integration needs to be done. Sectorial kind of planning needs to be brought in. Then only we can really say there is dynamism into the action plans. Or else you'll always have these gaps coming in, and then people in a long-term way are going to be exposed. A lot of buzzes around air pollution. All of us staying in Delhi, we hear it out. But heat is the next thing where none of us, no one, at least in global south, is going to be insulated. So we better start working it out.
Fabulous. So you're basically talking about the need for more granularity instead of 50 years like this year. And you're talking about really looking at the big picture, not putting band-aids like lesser working hours. But Dr. Palit, you're a scientist. If you were advising every one of these 748 districts, what would be the key thoughts you would offer them? We are now doing this girl, boy, mind.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. I think it's an interesting question. I look at it from the, I'm not a scientist on the other side, that means on the cause of the effect, but how to mitigate the effect. So yes, the poor are the most vulnerable for any changes in temperature. Probably they also don't have the wherewithal to have an AC or something like that, so the direct burnt off heating is on them. Traditionally, we have seen in India, the way we design our houses. Now we have shifted to a Western model of development, but I think the traditional model of development, the way the materials that are being used for house construction and other things are excellent in the form of heat resistant. That means it keeps the temperature inside the house very low. Now I hail from Assam, the northeastern part of India. I have seen when I was a kid, I have seen our houses. My father constructed a house, and the height of the house is very high. Now we have almost like, if it used to be 12 feet high, now you don't get a house more than 10 feet and the heat gets trapped. So I think somehow we have to go back to the traditional practices, which are more, you can say, in line with the requirement that we have. Nowadays in constructing buildings, we call it green buildings or eco-sensitive buildings, where instead of putting up an air conditioner, you can also use a tunnel, basically an earth air tunnel, what we call it, because below a certain depth, your temperature remains the same throughout the year. It is about 20 to 23 degrees Celsius, and if you can bring that air inside your room, so whether it is during the cold or during the hot season, the temperature will remain the same. So I think we have to go back to such traditional models and learn from them. Everything modern may not be that good. We also have to take a lesson from the traditional model and see how we can use it in the context of today and accordingly take it forward. So probably that would answer many of the problems that we are having.
Fabulous. So just to turn to Anita once, you know, the famous writer Elizabeth Colbert has written this really iconic book. She works on climate change, and she's written a book called The Sixth Extinction, and her theory is that we are in the sixth extinction, and what is happening is species always get extinct, but the pace of extinction is really, really rapid. And Anita, I want to turn to you and ask you, what is the data on the ground related to species, to birds? What's the data telling us?
I think for sure we are seeing a quickening of the pace at which species seem to be depleting. I think certain specific kinds of species. And we spoke about renewable energy a little earlier. I think the GIB is a classic example of a species, a bird that was almost our national bird, because and I think Salim Ali was very much in favor of making the great Indian bustard the national bird of India. But I think there was bureaucratic pushback because they were worried people would mispronounce the name and it would be an embarrassment to the country. Sadly, had the GIB actually been made our national bird, it probably wouldn't be standing in the precarious position it is. And so there you are looking at specific human-made problems such as renewable energy farms, which are actually leading to the decimation of a species. If you look in the northeast, close to Assam where you come from, if you go further east to Arunachal Pradesh, to the border with China, to the Namdapha National Park, you have this magnificent heron called the white-bellied heron. It is believed that less than 20 breeding individuals exist, because this heron actually relies on very clean, fast-flowing rivers and streams. And obviously, once you start damming all the rivers in Arunachal Pradesh, you're not going to have fast-flowing streams. And of course, pollutants and anthropogenic pressure. If human settlements spring up around rivers, you're obviously going to destroy habitats. So we are seeing that very clearly in terms of clear examples of species numbers actually falling. And I will take a leaf out of what you said about architecture. Everyone asks me, I mean, the minute they know you're a bird watcher, they say, why are sparrows disappearing? I'm sure all of you have been, it's been a discussion that we've all had. And my answer to that is, look around you. When I moved to Delhi 25 years ago, I'm originally from Chennai, is that it was a city with a lot of old homes with overhanging roofs, because that would keep the heat at bay. It would create these little niches where sparrows would nest. Or there'd be these large hedges of bougainvillea and other plants and shrubbery, which is crucial for the nesting of these birds. Now you come in, you remove all this form of architecture and replace it with very modern structures that look like that would look as at home in London and New York as they would in Delhi, and with glass balconies, which is the latest fad and has been a fad in Delhi for 10 years. Where is the poor bird going to come and nest? You remove the habitat and then you ask the question, where is the bird? It's a bit ironic, isn't it? And it's really these changes that, and unfortunately 2 of my 3 examples, actually all my examples are basically decimations being caused by human or what we call anthropogenic kind of change. And to continue from what you said about erratic monsoons, depleting wetlands are leading to a huge drop in water birds, because they're directly dependent on large clean bodies of water. And these are changes that as bird watchers we can see within the, I can say 15 years ago when I began birding, we would see large numbers of species on the Yamuna. Today even the human being does not want to go near the Yamuna, though I think Kejriwal is still threatening to do so.
So, thanks. And you may or may not approve of this, but I am going to make a plug for this book, Shashank, Dalvi and Anita. And today is World Wetland Day, and this is about, India's rarest birds. And it's got these very diverse bird watchers and their adventures on trying to see, including the heron, but several other birds, including the extinct pink-headed duck. And firstly, it was very rarely available to begin with, but the only image we have is a painting. And I was very struck by some of these adventures about birds and so much around monsoons and wetlands. And I took it out while you were speaking because I thought it would be interesting. But I want to go back to Dr. Palit now. Now you, for 26 years, you've been in this field, and by now you would have, whether or not you express them publicly, but you would have opinions. And all of us who work on this field always wish कि मैं होता तो मैं ये कर देता, ऐसे हो जाना चाहिए था, right? So how would you advise, what are the couple of things we're missing out across India to adapt or build resilience either ways to climate change? Like what would you like to get done?
Okay, so what I would have done. So when of course, let's make it one thing first put here, that India has not contributed to climate change the way the Western countries have. So whenever we come to a debate, it's very clear, we should be very clear that our contribution to climate change is extremely minimal. The cumulative greenhouse gases that has been emitted from the start of industrial revolution to now is extremely minimal. So no matter if we 100% or 80% also make a change, the effect of it in the global emission scenario would be minimal unless the Western countries take their action. Now, having said that, it doesn't leave us with that we should not do anything, and India as a country, I think, is doing wonderful work as far as mitigation is concerned. I think the economic survey this year has also mentioned about the adaptation, and that's a good thing that India has also started working on adaptation and resilience, making the different district more resilient. So Abinash talked about the district and energy plan and the climate. Of the districts are doing that. And probably what we are missing is that speed at which things are getting done. We are in the right direction, but maybe the scale and speed is slow. If I would have been at the bureaucracy, probably I would have taken a little faster action to speed up and bring in and also focus going beyond the cities. Cities are extremely important, definitely, because the maximum consumption is in the cities. But at the same time, the rural aspirational growth is also there, and we should be mindful of the rural aspirational growth and also the climate, and see that how we can make the growth happen in both cities and rural areas in a way which is climate friendly. So that again I go back that after 30 years our children doesn't say that you are the culprit who has made the climate bad. The way I am blaming the Western countries, nobody should blame me for the what is happening to it.
So I think that was a really, really important point about how little and negligible India's contribution has been. And even though many of our resources went through the process of, colonization into developing those economies which then have resulted in climate change. So there's so much irony in climate change and who contributed and how they contributed. It's almost like we are being impoverished twice over, once from a process of colonization and once from being hit by climate change. But I'm going to come to the last round of questions before audience questions, and I'll start with Anita. Anita, what are citizen scientists telling us today? And you have some examples, thoughts?
Comes to citizen science, I think the Indians are significantly contributing. I'm a bird watcher and I'm part, and I use a platform called eBird. I don't know there are birders in the audience who also use eBird. Well, basically you go out, I watch these birds on Bhopal Lake, so I'll quickly log into my eBird account and I'll make a list. And there are lots of Indians who are now doing that, and that contributes real-time data collection for scientific data analysis. And so eBird has been in India for about 10 years, and in 2023 a bunch of scientists came together to see what they could make from the eBird data. And they looked at data collected by about 30,000 bird watchers, around 300, I made a note of this so I wouldn't forget, 330 million observations is what they used. It's a huge data set. I think that should satisfy the data scientists here. And they came up with some really important findings. I think they realized that common birds like Indian rollers, what we call neelkant, when you go on highways, you see this blue bird sitting on the wire, that's the neelkant, they are disappearing. And that's connected possibly to pesticide use in agricultural fields, straight off. And then you have ducks, water birds, and birds of prey are disappearing. And these are birds of open grasslands, open natural ecosystems, which are actually disappearing because a lot of our revenue records in government classify them as wastelands. So there's a lot of clear change that is visible through data collected by citizen scientists. So when people ask, what can you do? I'm saying if you're interested in birds, nature, go out, observe and report, because your information and the data that you collect on a daily basis is really important. You don't have to do some fancy research and go sit in a remote area for 3 months and be a scientist, but you can as a citizen contribute, I think, significantly.
Thank you. Now, this is a literature festival, and Abinash, you've been giving us pretty grim data. We've been talking since the COP29. Both of us were going to Baku, and we were both on TV programs together, and I began to look at the data that he was generating about loss of livelihoods and now the shifting monsoon. And at a point when some of your data seems, I know there's a certain objectivity, but there's a certain darkness to it as well. And I myself wonder, what is it that you read? And what is it that you read not only to keep informed, but to stay stable in your mind rather than lose yourself in the darkness of the data you're finding, honestly?
Well, Anita, you just said, I deal with data, and we have this fun. We keep joking with each other. We are none other than glorified astrologers for the climate, in a way. When data comes, data also has its own fallacies. how you use this data, how you collect the data, how you analyze them, and then how you put them into action is somewhere that data is going to be coming in. The data, since we are in Literature Festival, Bhopal Literature Festival, data actually come up with stories. And if the way you put this data into stories is something that always motivates. You said about books, I'll come to that, but I'll first come to some of the real examples. In 1999, super cyclone struck Odisha. 10,000 people lost their lives. More than thousands of hectares of forest were devastated by that super cyclone. There were a group of self-help group women who were full-time farmers and part-time environmental conservists. And they have started rejuvenating a whole forest along the coastline, east coast. That is a story of hope, where you see women are coming together and kind of revitalizing the forest. There is someone, it's by the name called Mandakini in Uttarakhand. There is no early warning systems. She started her own radios of early warning systems, where she sends out to local village people informations. It's kind of community radio now, where landslides are going to happen, where forest fires are going to happen, whether you should take it, whether you should not take it. So these data numbers again create multiple ripple effects. Some of the books, the whole environmental journey starts by not naming Rachel Carson Silent Spring. That's how we should all go back to Rachel Carson Silent Spring, because it was again data number and information that created into a movement, and a movement that could destabilize during then the European kind of history and the geopolitics going around it. Some of the recent books were from some of the new age authors. Adam Grant's original writes a lot about how we should treat. But in climate science, we don't need to reinvent wheel. What we need to do is go back to our roots. Our traditional way of living and life actually puts together this all information, and it helps us in kind of knowing what should be the way of life to largely mitigate it. The quick book, the recent book that I have been reading it has a lot of data points on innovation. Bill Gates has tried to put that compendium on climate disaster. It sounds disaster, but it actually has a lot of hope. So I'll kind of put that climate change is also a hope for all of us to come together. Then only climate of managing climates can be changed.
So last but not the least, Dr. Palit, as usual, a slightly wider question for you. Trump is here, right? And of course, he's begun by pulling out of the Paris Agreement, or at least he's trying to, and he will. WHO, bye-bye, so on and so forth. And it looks like even we in India might not be spared, his whims. How do you think this is going to impact India, and how should we prepare for this? How should India prepare for Trump in a climate perspective?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And everybody has their views. So I'll put a view. I see it on a very positive side, purely from the Indian perspective, and I'll tell you why. Now, of course, Trump has withdrawn from the climate agreement. It will take about an year or so to actually withdraw from the agreement because of the process. I hope it doesn't start a dominoes effect. Argentina's president, I am told, has also said that they might withdraw. This morning or yesterday morning, I think I was reading the newspaper, Indonesia is also saying similar things, that if Trump has withdrawn, why should we be there? Of course, India is not, I'm sure that India is not going to withdraw, and we have already, despite not contributing to the climate change, we are taking major steps in towards a cleaner, greener economy. Now, the way I see it positive is that many of the investors, the US investors who are investing big in the climate domain, on climate technologies or on climate projects, and if in the US they are not making those investments, I am sure that for 4 years their investment. And if we can create the ecosystem, then many of those investments might come to India. Many of the companies who have committed to be net zero by 2050, which are based in US like Google or Amazon and others, I'm sure that they are not going to change their policy. In some smaller investors might change their policy. Some of the banks which are directly where the US has a stake, probably for the next few years might change their policy, but most of the big corporations, I don't think they're going to change their policies. And probably the South countries has an opportunity here to tap that investments if the US establishment is not tapping that investments.
I'm so glad you said that. Also because I feel that in any case, India is not getting getting the green funds coming in. So in that sense, we are anyway forced to use our own innovation. And I'm going to stop asking questions now and turn to the audience if you have questions for anyone. Is there an audience mic? Yeah, the first hand went there. Madam, the first hand was there. So we'll follow sequence. No, you need the mic. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Saurabh, and I've been following the larger conversation. My question is that, there is a lot of investment, even when green investment is coming in or is being pledged, or research is being pledged in research. The research is in the direction of geotechnologies, which we know inherently, we have no idea what the risks are. And so I think that there needs to be a very fine-grained analysis of what the funding is really for. And do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Before anything, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Saurabh. I teach at the School of Planning and Architecture.
Great,
my
thanks.
Landscape.
Just to put a context, yes.
And I've also, so I have an interest in environment issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to take this? Would you, both of you?
Thanks. So it's an interesting question. I think yes, definitely whatever investment is being made, the risks are being assessed. I don't think a private sector will make investment without assessing the risk. But if you are saying that the risks for the investor, yes, it is happening, but the risks for the environment, probably, as I said in my first point, that we need to be mindful of whether we are using renewable energy or we know about the ill effects of coal, but coal is also here to stay, so investments in coal is also happening, at least by the government of India, because we cannot just leave alone coal. But for renewable energy also, I think, I remember till a few years back we are discussing with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and we did raise points, and they said that, well, the technology is still evolving, so let some of the points be taken care of by Bureau of Environment and Forest rather than we taking up some of these points. But I think now gradually some of these environmental risks because of renewable energy, for example, renewable energy, the entire value chain is not green. The process of production of energy is clean. The mining, you need to mine to get materials for solar PV panels, or the end of the panels, these are not yet to be clean. That means these are still, the process being followed is still the conventional process. So I think those risks also need to be taken care of. But at the same time, we are also a very cost-sensitive country. So we have to have a balance between what should be the cost, the risk, the investment dynamics, and accordingly take it forward. So we cannot just follow one particular aspect and leave the other two.
Yeah, I'll keep it very short. We are actually working on climate readiness for all the top 10 emitting states in India, and the report is going to come out soon. Normally we don't put out numbers before it is peer reviewed, but I'll give you some of the inferences from the preliminary analysis. We are doing systemic readiness, we are doing technological readiness and financial readiness at a subnational level for this top 10 emitting states. And the latest or the initial trends tells us that technologically we are very weak. We are very weak because we don't look at what Dr. Palit said rightly, that we don't look at the whole value chain. And that's where the technology is still dependent on developed countries, and that has been one of the preaching grey side of the negotiations also. The technologies that have been brought in, you have taken up the carbon sink, you have bought in technologies that you need to ask others. It is like the virus companies selling out antiviruses, it's in a similar fashion. That's kind of the conundrum. Again, we need to go back to the history to look at what you are referring to, that any of the technology or any of the strategies that we put in place, history tells us better. Kosi bridge that happened in Bihar, which was one of the massive floods. People have lost their lives, livelihood, and especially the soil lost its content, right? You can't have agriculture practices still today. That was an engineering failure. That was never a climate failure. Although we named that Nepal ने पानी छोड़ दिया इसके वजह से वो बाढ़ आ गई थी. Still that folklore goes around in Bihar. So that's where the concept of maladaptation comes into picture. What exactly is the value chain? How is that looking at Bharati is working on around circular economy? So those kind of nuances of technology, data, and then the citizen science need to come in all together. Then only you can mitigate. So,
so first of all, very informative and sensitizing discussion. We had some small questions which are coming in my mind. Yeah, I'm Humendra Yadav. I'm from Jabalpur, but based at Bhopal right now. So my question is, our topic is our planet in transition? So was always in transition, or the thing like planet has to be in transition? It was, it is, or it will be. If we are afraid about the speed of transition, then what is the parameter to define that that space is good and this space is not good? And another question is about the adaptation, anukulan. So when environment and climate is changing, the species which will survive, they will be doing adaptation. So I see some of the changes in we were talking about the birds in urban areas. So sparrows, I see very little, but recently I have seen, especially in Bhopal, bulbul has suddenly increased and we are seeing more of bulbul. So something is becoming, more good for those bulbul. And
Anita, can you?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because this is something that's the classic way to understand this. The easiest way to understand this is to think of a mountainous landscape, where you think of it as a layer cake, with different birds at different elevations. So what happens is when it gets too warm, and as it has been happening, scientists are actually observing movement upward of birds. So birds that could live, say, below 1,000 meters are now suddenly living 3,000, 1,500 meters. Now there's an influx, and the bulbul is a good example of, because the bulbul is a very gregarious species which is highly adaptable. It eats a lot of things, it can live in a lot of temperatures, it's learned to live with humans. So when there is a movement of birds, and there's a change in the mix of birds in the landscape, there are losers and winners. You're upsetting the balance. And which means that other species have competition for food, for nesting places, and raptors may proliferate. So there's a lot of changes that happen to an ecosystem. So that's one of the classic evidences of climate change affecting speciation, so to speak. Yeah, and the fact that, for example, in Delhi, we are seeing a proliferation of black kites because we have a huge carrion management problem in Delhi. Because we no longer have abattoirs. There's a lot of how do you dispose of that? So then you have increase in vulture populations because they scavenge off human waste. And an extension of that is a stray dog problem because our waste management is simply terrible. So these are all connected issues, and I think you will see these changes happen, and you spotted one. There are many such changes happening in terms of species patterns, which are not visible to us, but they actually affect a lot of other species in the way, because there's more competition, like I said, for food, for nesting, and resources in general. Yeah.
So we're going to take the last two questions, first from you and then from you, and we will answer them very briefly because all are going to be thrown out together very soon. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Lokesh Guliani.
what you do. It's so strange for
I'm a
us to
consultant.
introduce ourselves but
Yeah.
not to know who we're talking
I'm
to.
a consultant basically. I work for government advisory roles basically. So you talked about Jodhpur in Bikaner, and you talked about Jaisalmer from Great Indian Bustard. I'll talk about a little. I'll ask for ecotourism basically. जब हम फॉरेस्ट की बात करते हैं तो फॉरेस्ट ज़्यादातर कहाँ है, वो हमारे गांव के आसपास है. दैट इज़ द एरिया, और वो गांव के लोगों के साथ बहुत सालों से कोएग्जिस्ट कर रहे हैं पीसफुली. फिर हम एक कॉन्सेप्ट लाते हैं जिसको हम इको टूरिज्म का नाम देते हैं, और उसके अंदर हम भीड़ की भीड़ फॉरेस्ट के अंदर घुसाने की कोशिश करते हैं. फॉरेस्ट में कुछ सालों पहले तक आदमी दो ही काम के लिए जाता था, या तो देह त्यागने या फिर तपस्या करने. इको टूरिज्म के लिए तो नहीं जाता था. तो मेरा आपसे ये क्वेश्चन है कि क्या इको टूरिज्म फॉरेस्ट को किसी तरह से कोई फायदा पहुंचा रहा है, या हम नुकसान ज्यादा कर रहे हैं?
Thank you. आप आंसर, but
I'll rather take one line. ये फॉरेस्ट के लिए हो, चाहे शहरों के लिए हो, चाहे स्टेट्स के लिए हो, there is something called as carrying capacity, right? अगर आपकी हाथ एक 5 किलो की डंबल पकड़ सकती है, उसके ऊपर अगर 10 किलो का डंबल डालते हैं, या तो हाथ टूटेगा या नीचे डंबल गिरेगा. That's what answers whether we should have a ecotourism feasible. Anything done with the parameters of carrying capacity, कितना आप ले सकते हैं, कितना आप खा सकते हैं, कितना आपको कितनी जरूरत है, right? That is what is actually the indicator that we should look at in any of our decisions, at a personal level, at a public policy level, at a environmental level, and more largely at a community level. The sooner we start that, the better it is for us.
last question is yours. Thank you for helping us close this panel.
Thank you so much. So my name is Nirmal Singh, and I had almost 40 years of the corporate stint, and currently I'm staying in a village where both of us, me and my wife, we have a small 2 BHK house, and that's where we spend. We are taking care of almost 1,000 fruit plants, a variety of fruit plants. Anyway, that's my background to answer your first part of it, okay? The question is, it is said that, look, this earth has enough for everybody's need, but not for everybody's greed, number one, okay? Number two, विकास और विकार, ये दो ऐसे शब्द हैं जो बड़े करीब चलते हैं, but विकास को विकार होने में समय नहीं लगता. The question is it the issue of compliance, or is it the issue of a character? That's the question.
So, because it's a complex one, I'm going to take a big shortcut and pass it on to you, Dr. Palit.
Well, my one-line answer would be that the government has launched a program, Lifestyle for Environment, and I think it's high time that we all follow the lifestyle for environment, so that what you said, Vikas should not become a Bika.
With this, I want to really thank Bhopal Lit Fest organizers. There's Raghav and there's Meera right now. And I just want to thank all of you for holding this panel. Thank you to the audience. We were very nervous when we started. We said, why don't we just make a chopal? Kyunki koi hai hi nahi. But soon enough, there was a lot of people. But most of all, thank you to the panelists. They're so erudite. It is such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time out, coming here. And all the best, and let's hope something good comes out of these conversations for all of us later. Thank you.
Well, it was an enriching conversation. I would like to say a few lines which resembles and speaks for what we have done in this session. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. So I would go on for a Q&A quiz question very quickly, and whosoever says the right answer gets the book. The audience got to raise their hands first, or they'll be disqualified. The question is, since we have a lot of experts here, I know many of us would know the answer. The question is, when was the Paris Agreement started or was signed? Please, sir. 2015. Please come up on the stage for the photo op. And can we have a big round of applause for... So please identify yourself.
Hello everyone, I am Rahul and I am a young professional working in development sector.
Inspiring book, Living an Enriched Life by Dale Carnegie, a timeless guide to building self-confidence, setting goals and cultivating a positive attitude for a more fulfilling life. It's time for memento giving, and here we have our president, Mr. Raghav Chandra, and Meera Das. As we conclude this deeply enriching session, I would like to request both of them to please present the memento to our esteemed speakers. Padma Shri Bhil artist Bhuri Bai has created this artwork for Bhopal Literature Festival 2025 depicting the connection between nature, earth and the human being and the environment, and the circularity inherent and imperative to our existence, to our thank you for sharing your wisdom and creativity and insights which have deeply inspired us. Thank you very much. Can we have a big round of applause once again for our esteemed guests? Thank you very much.